a very interesting perspective that you have brought to us. So with that, it's not only the US, but also Ethiopia's timing is just like the US want us, to forget the justification why in the first place that it has put that designation on Ethiopia. Ethiopia also, or the Ethiopian government wants us to think, oh, because of this, now the US is lifting the sanction, for us not to talk about this possible or potential concessions that the two governments have made behind the scene. Before we go to the next question, I would like to invite Kwame, to comment on this. Yeah, Kwame.
Thank you, Mahlet. Lambert, thank you very much. You've given me really something to think about. You've laid out some good points, very, very good points. But I just want you to allow me to think otherwise. I think that when it comes to the sanctions, there's one side which you have not spoken about. The fact that I think the fact that since the beginning of this conflict which we had in Ethiopia, in the northern part of the country, the United States has not gotten any victory worth of somebody conceding to or giving concessions to. If you look at how this conflict started, that Sisi, for example, when we had problems, Ethiopia had problems with Egypt, Prime Minister Abiy chose to go to the African Union. Sisi decided to go to the UN. That was #1 loss for the United States, because Ethiopia did not fall in the trap of going to the UN. Because I think that people like Prime Minister Abiy remembers what happened in Congo in 1960. That Nkrumah went and invited, we were discussing this yesterday actually. Nkrumah went and invited the United Nations into Congo. And what the United Nations ended up doing was killing the Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, after the United Nations aiding the United States and its allies. So I think that the United States is not, the United States has not got, so I'm saying that the United States, from what it has achieved regarding the conflict which we have had, I mean, it may be possible what Lambert is saying. I'm not discounting it, but what I'm trying to say is that this is also worth thinking about. That the Prime Minister Abiy did not fight all this long, since 2020, to reach here to give concessions to the United States. He did not, move all around the region, to mobilize the region and put trust in the African Union to solve this problem and reach this point and try to, to concede to the United States. What was also, when we look at what was at stake for Ethiopia, if the sanctions were not lifted, if Ethiopia has been able to fight through all this propaganda, the BBC, the machinery which they had put up against Ethiopia, we should ask ourselves, should we take it that at this point we think that Ethiopia can still not fight through, looking at the fact that it was able to fight through, that it should now want to concede to the United States in any way because they wanted to lift the sanctions. They wanted the United States to lift the sanctions. Now, when we look at AGOA, because AGOA is what has been put up in front very much, that Ethiopia would lose, opportunities, for trade and stuff like that. And of course, we saw some, apparel, clothing factories closed down because of this. The United States closed down some of its, factories which are associated with the United States, in line of AGOA. But it was the United States actually which was benefiting very much from this friendship, that it was getting cheap labor. In Ethiopia, they were manufacturing these clothes, in Ethiopia, and getting cheap labor. Okay, and then they are exporting these same clothes to the United States and saying that Ethiopia is the one exporting, when it was not true. It's the United States which was exporting and leaving behind crumbs that they were leaving to Ethiopia. So how much trade was this? I think that trade is not more than 150 million. The trade under AGOA, which Ethiopia, how many the goods which Ethiopia is sending to the United States every year annually under AGOA, I really don't think those goods are more than $150 million, just $1 million, not even a billion. Now, when we look at Ethiopia's economy, which is 100 and up to $120 billion, is coming to $120 billion, an economy of that, I really don't think that you would give concessions just because of $150 million. So I just want us to give that a thought a little bit, when it comes to concessions. I would think that because Ethiopia has aligned, for example, the Eritrea, and also has aligned with Russia. If you remember, the prime minister of the foreign minister of Russia, Mr. Lavrov, Sergei Lavrov, when he came, he visited Ethiopia. You can see that immediately the foreign minister of China, he was appointed, Mr. Wang Yi, who was the ambassador of China to the United States. Immediately he was appointed as the prime minister. The first place he visited across the world, it was Ethiopia. So I think that Ethiopia cannot concede, cannot give concessions when it has these kind of relationships with China, with Russia, with Eritrea, with the regional countries, and it has attachment. Its economy is attached to all these countries. I think what is at stake when it comes to the relationships which Ethiopia has with these countries I've spoken about, the regional countries, Russia, China, what is at stake is much more than giving concessions to the United States. I think that it would not give concession to this. Now, when it comes to privatization, which Lambert spoke about, I think that Prime Minister Abe, what he's trying to do is the same thing sort of what Deng Xiaoping did. Ethiopia's economy has been closed, for a long time. You remember that when Deng Xiaoping came to China, he opened the economy, okay? And private people started having, businesses in the country. They left private people to have economy, unlike the period of Mao Zedong. So I think this is what the Prime Minister Abe is trying to do right now, because its economy has sort of been in some way emulating what happened in China. The economic miracle which has been happening in China. If you look at the year 2007 and 2008, the Ethiopian economy was the fastest growing in Africa. It deposited 10% GDP growth. So that does not mean that the Prime Minister Abe cannot make mistakes. I think he may make mistakes. What I'm saying does not mean that he cannot do mistakes. And it does not mean that he's doing right. Me, myself, I'm worried, especially about Ethiopia Airlines, because that is a very big gift to the African continent. What the Ethiopian people built in Ethiopian Airlines is a gift to the African people. Now, for him to tamper with Ethiopian Airlines and do it the wrong way, it will be disastrous, not only for Ethiopia, but for the African continent. So I think that he's trying to walk that rope, that tight rope, to open up the economy to the extent that it will allow it to grow a little bit more. But whether he will do it the right way, that is another question.
Interesting. Yeah, Ethiopian Airlines is what everybody talking about and considering the recent changes. Anyway, again, it's another topic for another day, but really thank you, both of you, for bringing this interesting perspective, Lambert, and then Kwame also for coming in and adding on this, sharing your view on this.